just 6 months of this administration, the Boko Haram that was in control of a territory larger than an entire geographical zone in Nigeria has been reduced to a fleeing, bomb-throwing, cowardly and disorganized army. All Boko Haram can do now is to attack soft targets such as markets, motor parks, mosques, and entertainment centers, killing innocent men, women, and children.
Soft targets are the most difficult to defeat in the whole world.
And saddening as it is, the killing is not a true reflection of the progress being made by the military against Boko Haram.
From Triple E Media, I'm Lai Mohammed, and this is The Backstory. In 2015, when President Muhammadu Buhari took office, he had 3 priorities: security, economic reforms, and development. Since 2015, Nigerians have been hearing from the government that Boko Haram has technically been defeated. The most prominent voice delivering that message has been Lai Mohammed, the Minister of Information and Culture. Standing in complete contrast to what the administration is saying are headlines like Boko Haram slaughters 43 farmers in Borno, and as recent as this week, gunmen attack Katsina school, abduct students. The government communications strategy seems to be at odds with the reality on the ground, which made us wonder, who is the government actually talking to?
The killings of farmers and fishermen in Zabarmari really brought to the forefront the government's inability to control the narrative. Right away, there was already an issue of communication, which started with the number of farmers killed. Remember that the killing of the farmers happened that Saturday morning, the 28th of November. By Saturday evening, Channels Television were reporting that at least 40 farmers had been killed. By Sunday morning, most local news outlets were reporting 43, which was the official number that were buried that day in Zabarmari. But that Sunday evening, a top official at the United Nations system in Nigeria released a statement saying that at least 110 farmers were killed in that attack. And when an international organization like the United Nations makes a statement like this, all other international news organizations use that source as the official number.
So we begin this news hour with breaking news from Nigeria, and the United Nations says at least 110 civilians have been killed and many more injured.
Sources say more than 100 people have been killed in a brutal massacre in
Funerals have been held in northeastern Nigeria for some of the estimated 110 people killed during the weekend in an attack on farm workers.
Now, the United Nations has since released a statement withdrawing the 110 number. They stated that the number was unconfirmed, but too late, the number had already gone viral. We saw something very similar happen recently with the EndSARS protests. The government and CNN have been locked in a media fight. CNN claimed that the Nigerian army killed 38 people at Lekki toll gate during the protests. In the end, CNN had to withdraw its story as false, but again, not until after the story had gone viral.
So, at this point in the timeline, it's Monday the 30th of November and people are waking up to the news of the killings in Zabarmari. And there is still uncertainty over the number of the dead. But you know what? For the average Nigerian, the numbers don't matter. Even one death in the name of violence and insecurity is too much. Nigerians are getting tired of hearing about kidnappings, killings, and other violent incidents. So, since the military have been charged with the nation's security, Nigerians started to say that the military service chiefs should be sacked.
Service chiefs have long overstayed. I understand that a lot of them are supposed to be retiring or have retired by now, but the government still decides to keep them. They have become
send fresh troops. Retired the service chiefs. There is generals. Still, we have generals.
The service chiefs command the Nigerian armed forces, and there are 4 of them. There's the Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, and Chief of Air Staff. The calls to sack the service chiefs probably started sometime in January 2020 with the Senate.
And I will move as an amendment to this motion, calling on the immediate replacement of the service chiefs in Nigeria.
Out of idea. We thank them, they have done their best. When they came in, they came with strength, they came with vigor, they came with commitment to end this thing. But now they are full of complacency and they are out of idea completely. We know this and we are aware.
So this idea that the president should sack the service chiefs has been going around and around since January. And every time something like the events at Zabarmari happen, this is what you hear Nigerians say.
Now, in response to the calls to sack the service chiefs, President Buhari on August 4th of this year said the service chiefs are doing well and doing their best. In an interview with cable newspaper on this day, on the 12th of February 2020, Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, said the solution to insecurity is not the removal of the service chiefs.
Now, the current service chiefs are the same ones that the president appointed when he first took office in 2015. And to be fair, between 2015 and 2017, they have delivered results. The Council on Foreign Relations is an independent organization. They maintain a security tracker of certain violent incidents that are reported through the media. Now, according to their data set, over 15,000 people died in 2014 alone at the peak of insecurity in Nigeria. By 2017, that number had dropped to about 4,600 people. That's over a 300% decrease.
And we know that in 2015, the president had commanded the military to move their operational headquarters from Abuja to Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, in order to be closer to the battlefront. And between 2015 and 2017, government communications and media headlines were mostly reports on successful military operations, with assurances that the government was on top of the security situation in the country. We started to see headlines like this one from the Guardian newspapers. Troops of the Nigerian army rescued dozens of kidnapped women and children held captive by Boko Haram terrorists. And another one from Premium Times reads, troops arrest financier of the Boko Haram terrorists in Borno State.
But from 2018, the number of deaths due to insecurity started to climb again. So we've gone from about 4,600 people in 2017, and as of the last time we checked the council's database, we are now at about 9,000 deaths due to insecurity in 2020. So that's nearly a 200% increase since 2017. Yes, that's technically less than 15,000 in 2014, but it seems like we have been trending in the wrong direction since 2017.
Now, it was in December 2015 that we first heard the president say that we technically have defeated Boko Haram. That was during an interview with the BBC.
Articulated conventional attacks on centers of communication and population in towns and so on, they are no longer capable of doing that effectively. So I think technically we have won the war.
Again, in 2018, we see a similar statement from Lai Mohammed, the Minister of Information and Culture. And by the way, his name, Lai, which is spelled as L-A-I. Unfortunately, it sounds like the word lie, L-I-E. In a statement made by Lai Mohammed in February 2018 and published by the Daily Trust, he said, "Today, Boko Haram is no longer capable of carrying out coordinated attacks anywhere. But the government still acknowledges that isolated attacks occur." On December 30th, 2019, Lai Mohammed released another statement posted on the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture Facebook page saying, "Yes, the insurgents occasionally attack soft targets, but they don't hold any territory like they did before. They don't collect taxes. The attacks they used to carry out in Abuja and other cities are now a thing of the past." And he goes on to say, "It is important we as citizens do not say or do anything to demoralize the gallant troops who are fighting to keep us safe."
Now, let me be clear. No intelligent Nigerian can say the troops are not doing their job. We know the troops did their job. The numbers between 2015 and 2017 shows that they did their job. We saw a 300% decrease in security-related deaths during that time period. But then something happened between 2018 and now. The numbers are clear. Insecurity has gotten worse since 2018. Yet, government keeps saying Boko Haram are technically defeated. And then we also hear government say that the insurgents have been reduced to only soft targets, like churches, mosques, markets, and defenseless civilians. Even after the attacks on the Zabarmari farmers, Lai Mohammed again repeated a similar message in a press conference carried by TV360.
The Boko Haram is going after soft targets. It's a sign of weakness and desperation on their part, especially after they have suffered huge setbacks in the hands of the military in recent times.
There is just a disconnect somewhere between reality and what the government is saying. If the insurgents have been reduced to targeting civilians, isn't that a problem?
Okay, yes, it's true. The government has been struggling with communications since 2017, and the war itself shifted a bit in 2017. During an interview with Globewatch, General Adeosun Lamidi acknowledged that conventional efforts were no longer sufficient to deal with the insurgent group.
When they were holding barracks, holding towns and villages, it is easier. But now that they are in splinter groups in remote villages and in no particular place, they become more dangerous to deal with.
So basically, the general is saying, we won the conventional war. The Nigerian military reclaimed lands and destroyed Boko Haram's ability to organize coordinated massive attacks. But as the general said, when the insurgents were dispersed, they actually became more dangerous to handle. Instead of being in one place where they can be dealt with in the conventional way, the insurgents are now scattered. They can be anywhere. So the war has changed from conventional to what the military calls an asymmetric war. And when that shift happened, around the middle of 2018, that's when we see the government's communications also change. They became more defensive. And for starters, they launched a national campaign against fake news. We now started to see the government react to headlines like this one from the Defender newspapers. Soldiers deployed to Northeast, not begging for food or money. And another headline from Sahara Reporters also read, about 700 soldiers missing, more than 2,000 trapped as Boko Haram takes over Baga. That headline was also marked as fake news by the Ministry of Information and Culture.
So in addition to defending themselves against local news that was either fake or not favorable, the Nigerian military and government also had to defend themselves against foreign news. For example, in July 2019, the Wall Street Journal newspaper reported claims that in Maiduguri, bodies of Nigerian soldiers were secretly buried in unmarked graves at night. They were allegedly buried by the soldiers, presumably to hide the real death toll of the Nigerian security forces.
Again, the Nigerian military reacted to this report, calling it uninformed. They stated that troops killed by insurgents were buried in the traditions of the armed forces.
But then again, because the source is foreign media with above average reputation. A report like this went viral, and it's these types of reports that started to build a picture at odds with what President Buhari and Lai Mohammed have been saying. And by the way, it's not just local and foreign media that are frustrating government's communications. Even the Boko Haram insurgents seem to be using communications as a way to question the government's ability to control the situation in the north. We spoke with Dr. Abdullahi Tasiu.
I'm a senior lecturer and director of PhD programs in the Department of Journalism at City University of London.
He has also written several papers on government and Boko Haram communications. Dr. Tasiu observes that
anytime the government or the military issue a statement, for example, saying that we have defeated Boko Haram in one area or the other, or we have killed Sheikh Au, who is the leader of the overall Boko Haram before it later became factionalized. And they will counter that by bringing out, I will say sometimes more accurate information about the situation than what had been issued to the public by the government.
For example, in the case of the farmers killed in Zabarmari, we saw that the government's initial figures stood at 43. Boko Haram then released a number of 78. And of course, the United Nations reported 110. So we saw the government scrambling to explain their own number. Again, the government is on the defense.
So this is more like countering what the government said, just to show that they were still in control of the situation. So it's more of a communication that will depict them as a group that is still powerful.
Now, the rest of us as civilians do not live in the war zone. So we do not actually know if the insurgents are in reality still powerful or not. All we know is that when we wake up, our reality is news reports of kidnappings, killings, and banditry coming from every angle. Now, according to Dr. Tasiu, the government's communications have not really shifted to account for these realities.
I think there are within the government and within the military a faction that feels or believes that a mixture of propaganda and accurate information might be an effective tool of dealing with this issue, because they feel like they are dealing with a terrible insurgency that is not responding to conventional warfare and conventional method of dealing with crisis. And so for whatever reason, they decide to use a strategy that is to some extent of, I will say, is a form of propaganda model.
So basically, the strategy here is to repeat the same message that we have defeated the insurgents over and over again, and then hope that we don't notice the rise in reports of deaths due to insecurity. And this is not really an effective strategy, especially to those of us who have access to alternate sources of information. It's like Lai Mohammed and the government are not really thinking about all the possible audiences when they are communicating.
When you are planning your communication strategy, you will have to think of all the audiences and then target your messages to different audiences. Unfortunately, when they are conceiving this strategy and to some extent even some of the basic techniques, I think there is a lack of understanding of the audiences and how to target those audiences with specific messages.
It's possible that Lai Mohammed has a specific audience in mind when he communicates, but it doesn't seem to be people like us.
I agree with you that Lai Mohammed and the government have specific audiences in mind when they communicate. For example, I think the latest statement from Lai Mohammed after the Zabarmari killings was meant for Boko Haram. That was his audience. If you remember, Lai Mohammed said,
the Boko Haram is going after soft targets. It's a sign of weakness and desperation on their part.
It was as if he wanted to say to them, is that all you can do? You are going after people who can't defend themselves? But the government order statements about technically defeating Boko Haram that came in 2015, and then in 2017, and then in 2019 could be messages for Nigerians. In 2015, the party campaigned on the issue of security. So when they took office, they had to communicate that they had control of the situation. And again, the numbers show that between 2015 and 2017, the government did have control of the situation.
Yes, but by 2019, the numbers show that they are losing control. But the government kept communicating that they had technically defeated Boko Haram. This inconsistency between reality and the government's communication is what seems to be frustrating Nigerians the most. And it's probably why we tend to believe foreign media sources over our own government.
Again, this is also another problem with communication strategy. A communication strategy that is based on information that is not really accurate is always bound to fail. They are building some of the techniques based on the previous idea of propaganda, whereby if you say something like repeatedly, people might believe it. But the problem with reality is that if you say something and it later comes out to be inaccurate, the tendency is that, and the chances are that people will not believe you even if you give them some accurate information. And there were a number of times when the military will release some information that will later turn out to be inaccurate. And that is, I think, counterproductive in the work that they have been doing.
Now, these inconsistencies also make it harder for government and military to claim victory, even when they actually do something to deserve it.
And then, obviously, there are a number of times when they really achieve some significant progress. And because of the previous conception or perceptions of releasing of inaccurate information, people tend to be skeptical even when a huge achievement has been recorded by the military.
That last point that Dr. Tasiu made might actually be the key to understanding who Lai Mohammed and the government are talking to. Even though the nation's security situation has been trending downward since 2018, maybe Lai Mohammed has stuck to his message that we've technically won because that message is directed at the military. When we imagine the military, we often see strong, heroic men and women who are unemotional. But remember, they are no longer fighting a conventional war. And an asymmetric war is very different, something our military has not really experienced before in the past. It's like they are also learning as they are fighting. So if the citizens that they are trying to protect are dragging them in the media, maybe the government has to step in every now and again to encourage them to keep going. And also, let's not forget, the Nigerian military has a history of coups. And yes, we've been practicing democracy for over 20 years now, but that coup gene is still in the military's DNA. The communications may be a reminder to the military that they still have relevance in our new democracy. So I think there is a delicate balance that the government has to maintain in its broader communications. And frankly, at this moment, the military may be the priority audience.
Now that's one possible reason why government communications about national security make no sense to us. Government in this particular situation may not be talking directly to us. But in the off chance that government is trying to communicate with us, there is a lot of room for improvement. For example, government should stop calling civilians soft targets. It's a technical term, and it means nothing to the rest of us. And I'm confident that I speak for most Nigerians when I say I don't see myself as a soft target. So try calling us innocent civilians. Or if you don't believe we're innocent, then call us civilians. Also, please stop using the word just and the word only in front of soft targets, as in they're just going after soft targets or they're only going after soft targets. When you say that, it's like you're dismissing the significance of civilian lives, as if it's really not a big deal. Just a few people dead here and there, no big deal. Just a few hundred, no big deal. They're only soft targets. 9,000 dead, they're just soft targets. You need to fire whoever is advising you to use that phrase. We are not soft targets. We are innocent civilians. And they're not only going after us. They are going after us, and the government must do everything in its power to protect us. Now, I'm spending time on that particular phrase because if the words that government chooses to describe civilians is any reflection about how they actually feel and how they think about us, then we are screwed. I like riddles, and one of my favorite riddles goes like this. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? If a government is active and they don't communicate effectively, does all that activity really matter? The backstory is brought to you by E Media Productions. Production copyright 2020 by E Media Productions. If you enjoyed this episode of The Backstory and want to hear more, subscribe to our 234 Audio YouTube channel. Visit our website at 234audio.com and download our 234 Audio app. Episodes of this podcast can also be found on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Radio Public, Breaker, and Pocket Casts. This episode was made by Alexandra Gekpe, Rabia Hadejia, Richard Anyebe, Dominic Tabakaji, and Sam Tabakaji. Special thanks to Dr. Abdullahi Tasiu, John Iwodi, Anthonieta Kalunta, Stanley Bentu, and Lai Gbado Ikaleku. I'm Lai Mohammed. See you next week.